Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Adult Chair on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Michelle Chalfant.
Hello, Pete Wright.
Hello, Michelle Chalfant. How are you? That was a very proper introduction.
Do you like that? Yes.
I did.
Mr. Wright.
Mr. Wright.
Oh, my God. I've never said that before. You're Mr. Wright.
I am Mr. Wright. Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, please. You've just opened a very dark place in my history. Have you been looking for me all your life?
Been.
Yeah.
I think I have been.
No,
actually.
I have been vested with the worst pickup line ever. Like, I am if I were ever to leverage that, I would be the sleaziest, stupidest guy on the planet. I hear you've been asking around for me. I'm Mr. Right. Please.
Love it.
We are talking this is so appropriate for me to talk about how sleazy I could be to our subject today, raising self-esteem. I don't need any help. I'm Mr. Right. Yeah. We're talking all about that today. I'm very excited to hear where you'd like to go with this conversation. Before we get started, head over to theadultchair.com. You can learn more about the show. You can subscribe for free by signing up on our mailing list or anywhere the finer podcasts are served with a quick search for The Adult Chair, and join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. We would love to hear from you. And, one more thing. Apple Podcasts and iTunes. This is obviously the biggest directory of podcasts, and this is a directory of podcasts that serves other podcast apps. So even if you're not listening in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, Apple's directory is the backbone for a lot of other podcast applications. So you may not think this matters to you, but it really does. And so we're asking for some help. When you leave a 5-star review, a nice review and comment for the show, it makes us feel good to hear that the show means something to you. But even more important than that, your reviews help other people discover the show, because your reviews help the show surface in searches when people need help, when they're looking for guidance and advice and direction. And we really aspire that our show does just that. It helps people when they need to have a voice and a kind spirit with them. So taking a few minutes for you to write this kind review is one way you can help pay it forward to new listeners. And we deeply appreciate you helping to spread the word of this show in this way. If you're not listening to the show on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, I totally get it. If it's too much of a pain, we totally get it. Any share or rating in your podcast tool or application is fantastic. We sure appreciate you taking the time to do that. So your kind reviews go really far in paying dividends to help other people and help us spread the word. So we appreciate you taking a minute to do just that.
Yes, please.
Yes,
please.
Raising self-esteem, Michelle Chalfant. Mm-hmm. Are you feeling a little low? Is that
it? Yeah. I used to feel very low, so I relate to this topic big time.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yep.
So how did this come up? First of all, what inspired you to have this particular conversation? And then we'll talk about kind of where it comes from.
Usually it's, something that's happened in my life, or with a lot with clients, we'll come in saying different things, and then we'll realize, oh, blank is going on, which in this case, it's low self-esteem. Or how do we build healthy self-esteem? If we're adults, it's like we miss that window of opportunity as children when it would have been nice to have gotten it back then. But if we don't get it now we're adults, I have people that will come in and say, well, what do I do now? I'm, 40, 50, 60 years old, 35 years old, and I don't know, my self-talk is so negative, or I don't feel good about myself. I don't know how to feel good about myself. So that's where it kind of comes from. Is definitely some clients that have said this kind of thing. So
do you find, and this is a little bit of an aside, do you find that clients come to you with that are just sort of naturally themed? Like all at once, you'll end up with 4 or 5 people who are all struggling with the same kind of thing?
No, here's what happens, and it's not just to me. Is it happens to other therapists as well, where they will have clients come in and mirror what's going on in their own lives. Like it's fascinating. And that goes to show again, everyone in our experience is just a mirror. Like we hear that all the time. Everyone is a mirror for our lives, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what's amazing to me is like, let's just say if I'm fighting with Graham or we're in an argument at home and I go to work, it's like, probably 70% of the people that will come in that day are talking about how they're fighting with their spouse or they're not agreeing with their spouse, or they'll sometimes have the exact same thing going on that I have going on. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
This is the same thing where maybe it's at least part and parcel to, hey, I'm going to buy a Honda. Now all you see are Hondas.
Yes, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Right.
That's all we see.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the causes of poor self-esteem before we get into how to help connect to it. Where does it root?
Yeah. Well, it would be rooted again in the child share, because as children, and even growing into that adolescent, even as adolescents, what we need from our parents or caregivers, what we need is validation. So, and I don't mean just validation for when I get straight A's, but validation for who I am. And what I mean by that is, instead of saying, and again, I'm not saying not to say this to your children, like, yes, praise them. The great job at soccer. And what I say instead is, I loved watching you. I love watching you out there. So it's not you did a good job or a bad job. It's like, oh, I really love watching you. You look like you have a lot of fun out there. So it's more validating the kid versus what they do. And instead of saying, you didn't get all straight A's, what happened to that one B that you got? Like, what about, hey, you did such a great job. I noticed the effort that you put in all year. You did such a great job. But in addition to that, it's validating for who they are. So I remember this one time my son got in the car, and he was little. He was in grammar school. I can't remember how old he was, but probably something like 10 years old because he was younger. And he told me, he said, Mom, so-and-so dropped his, remember, the little kids have the pencil boxes with like a million pencils and erasers and all that crap in there.
Oh, yeah.
And so-and-so was at school, and he dropped his pencil box and it went all over the floor. And he said, no, he was little. He's like, nobody helped him pick up his pencil box or everything in the pencil box. So I helped him. He says, so I got down on my hands and knees and I helped him pick him up. And I was like, and I turned to him and I said, Blake, I said, wow. I said, that shows a lot of compassion. Like, you're a really compassionate person. How did that make you feel? And when I said that to him, I remember turning to my right and I put my hand on his knee. So it takes it to another level when we validate in that way. So it's validating for really who they are. Like, you're such a compassionate person, or you're so thoughtful. And then to touch the body somewhere as we say that, it just registers in the brain on a deeper level. But if we don't get that, that's one of the causes of self-esteem. It's like we don't know who we are. We look to our parents and caregivers to reflect back to us who I am in the world. And I think I brought this up on another show, but like, I got reflected back like all the time. Oh, Michelle's so pretty. Michelle's so pretty. Michelle's so pretty. It's like, then when Michelle got a wrinkle and gray hair, I was like, holy crap, who am I now?
Yeah, right.
I don't know who I am. Like, that's great, but if I gain weight, then I don't know. It was like, I remember this happened in my early 30s and late 20s. Like, and I was also validated for being like a really good water skier and snow skier. So if I'm not living where I snow ski and water ski anymore, and I'm not doing the activities that I feel like are part of my identity, because that's what I was validated so much for, then who am I?
Yeah.
And it sounds crazy, but it's like my self-esteem was in the toilet because I'm like, I don't know who I am. Now I'm 30, whatever, and I've got wrinkles, and I'm 40 and I've got, oh my God, gray hair's coming in and more wrinkles, and I've had kids, and oh my God, my butt's so big and it's not getting so, it's like all these thoughts went crazy through my brain, and I'm like, I don't know who I am. So I had to go through this whole process of, again, learning how to validate myself. But that's one of the main causes is we're not validated appropriately. And I hear this now, and I think this was happening when my kids finished playing soccer years ago. Like, how the little kids, like, everybody gets an award on the team?
Yeah, it gets to a question. I know. I have real problems with that. I think there's there's obviously the sense that we want to, kind of build into the culture the spirit of, fair play, and everybody's identified and honored for their participation. But at the same time, I really struggle with how to appropriately set the bar for achievement.
Yes.
Right? Like, and I struggle with that both with my own inner voice and in talking to my kids and peers and, about what success is, what should be appreciated. Like, it is possible for me to say, I appreciate your work, son. I appreciate how hard you worked on this project. And at the same time, a C is not something that's going to earn you any awards on it.
Right.
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 Those are two things that can exist in the same space. I'm proud of the hard work, and obviously there are things that we're going to need to fix if you're going to set a standard for higher achievement.
Right.
And those two things can exist. You can be a person who just plays on the team and not somebody who is an MVP.
Exactly.
Not everybody is an MVP.
Exactly.
I guess I also struggle with this with my own inner self-talk.
Yeah.
Right? Because I want to honor the hard work that I do. And when that hard work doesn't lead to accolades, doesn't lead to this grand appreciation, I also want to be able to recognize that there's something wrong. It doesn't have to crush me, but it has to lead to some other inspiration or motivation to change.
Right.
How do you do that without falling into the self-esteem trap?
I would still validate, though, for the effort and the joy that you had in doing the project or in putting the work out. Or it's a twist, because in our society, it's like we're validated for being the best, for being the best on the team, for having, making the most money, for doing the best of the best. And that's where it's a miss. It's like, we're missing the mindfulness part of like, well, I just had a lot of joy in doing it. And that's where I got my joy. It's like, that's what we're missing. It's very mental, and we're validating for the wrong things. It's not to say like, if you won an award that I wouldn't say, oh my God, that was so great. Good job, Pete. But isn't it so much about where you find your satisfaction in the process, like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation? Right. If what we're teaching by giving everybody a ribbon is that the motivation comes from the external pat on the back. Right.
And not the internal achievement of success of just being on the team.
Well, and I think too, we don't want our kids to feel bad because my son didn't get an award. Well, it's like, that's another part. It's like, who cares? Why can't we let our kids fail? Can I tell you a story? Mm-hmm.
There is a chance that when I say this, it's going to rub you the wrong way.
Oh boy.
But I need to say it because I think it's fascinating, and I think about it all the time, and it has changed the way I approach things that I'm not good at. My daughter has been going to this camp. My son just started this camp this year. My daughter's been doing it for 5 or 6 years now, and they have like an apprentice program where it's like the Marines, or it's like reserves. So, they go for these multi-week long experiences during the summer, and then one weekend out of the month throughout the year, they go off into the woods and they learn tracking and food prep and survival skills and all kinds of crazy things. And they have a motto, and the motto is presented in such a way that, it's not even a motto. It's just sort of a driving statement that is conditioned in an absolutely judgment-free way. And they put it on T-shirts, and it's just everywhere. It's what the counselors say to the kids, and the kids say to other kids, and it's just the experience of this place. And that motto is, I can't say it with a straight face, you're doing it wrong, do it better.
Oh, wow.
But it's not presented in a way of judgment. It's presented in a way of fact. And what I have found is that's so fascinating. Now that both of my kids are doing it, they say it to one another, and it is presented in a way of just a statement of fact. Oh, you're right. I am doing it wrong. I can do it better. I'm going to go ahead and change the way I do this thing because the result could be better. You're doing it wrong. Do it better. I've never seen anything like it. And when I first heard it, and when I first saw it on the T-shirt, after we'd been going to this place for years, and my daughter comes home and says, "Oh yeah, no, this is our motto." And it was the first time I'd ever heard it. But as I start being sort of more attuned to it and how it's conditioned with these, literally thousands of kids across the state every year are being conditioned with this statement. And it's changing the way they relate to performance.
I think that's an interesting word, though, is that they're conditioned and they understand the purpose of that phrase.
Yes.
Yeah. Because if you just said that too, if you pulled out like a sixth grader out of some public school near you and you said, "Hey, you're doing it wrong. You could do better," that would crush that kid, possibly.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, that's interesting. So it's how the brain's framing it,
It is how the brain is framing it. And I'll tell you, it has seeped into my subconscious. And I think about it all the time.
Wow.
If there is something that I'm working on, and when it's particularly particularly important for me is when I'm doing something that deep down I know is not the best of my ability. If I'm doing something and I feel like there's an opportunity to cut a corner in order to do something quicker, more efficiently, find a way around some hard thing by not doing it the right way, I'll say in my back of my mind, Pete, you're doing it wrong. Do it better. And it's really, you're better than this. You know you're better than this. And you can learn something new here about doing great work.
Wow.
And that changes the way I think about myself. So I say all that as a way to sort of come back around to this self-esteem question. Like this, for me, has become a motivating phrase that helps me think more positively about myself. Is that weird?
No, that's interesting. But again, it's how it's framed. It's how you see it. It's how it's programmed. If parents want to teach their kids this growing up, fabulous. But if they're only hearing that every once in a while because they're being judged for it, instead of really what I hear is like you're saying it more from the adult, which is a very different energy. And it's not a judgment. It's more saying push yourself that you can do better. You know that you can, but it's not a judgment.
Absolutely.
And you're just setting the bar a little higher for yourself, or you're knowing you're not reaching your own internal bar so you can do a little bit better. I think that's fabulous.
Oh, I'm so glad. I was worried as a therapist that you would come back and say, "Oh my God."
If it's framed and explained correctly to the children, to the child, then it's fine.
What's most interesting is that I can see I can feel my inner child has changed as a result, and my inner adolescent. Like in the words of the adult chair, like saying those words used to freak me out, and when I first heard them, it freaked me out because I could feel like I was responding from the adolescent.
Like you were being judged, of course. Yeah, or they're being judged, yeah.
Exactly. And they go into this sort of social panic. Like this means now suddenly everybody's watching me and they're judging me all the time.
Wow.
And that's not it at all. And once I move that to the adult chair, it's become a thing that I use as sort of my marching orders throughout the day, whether I'm making dinner, whether I'm whatever. It pushes me to do better work because it's a statement of fact. You're doing it wrong. Do it better.
Yeah, but not judgment. Different.
Yeah.
Cool.
It is cool. I derailed you. I'm sorry. I'm going to let
No, that's okay. That's okay. No, but we're talking about don't let your kid, how we talking about these little ribbons and all the stuff that we get now, we give out to our children. We don't want to see our kids fail. I see it now. I see it in high school with some of these moms. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? You're upset because why are you rescuing your kid? He's in high school. Like, what are you doing?
Totally.
Let them fail. Let them failing raises self-esteem because it causes the kid to go inside and find their own internal strength and climb out of whatever that they're in and fix it on their own. That's a self-esteem boost. But these parents now in this day and age that ride in and save their child from any kind of pain or suffering, they're doing their kids a disservice. It's not healthy at all. So we got to let our kids fail. Remember, we've talked about boundaries and parents are guardrails. We are the guardrails for our kids. So let your kids fail and put those guardrails not too far out, but like we're there for them if they're really struggling and they need us, but let them fail. It's a really healthy thing. Many of us also, as far as the causes go, we inherit it from our parents' unhealthy self-esteem. If I don't have healthy self-esteem, how in the world am I supposed to give it to my child?
Exactly.
You know? So I say this all the time when people say, how do I make sure that my kids are going to become healthy adults and able to live in their adult chair, as they get older? And my response is always the same. You sit in your adult chair as best you can so that then you're modeling for them how you do it. How do you live healthy? How do I become a healthy adult? Oh yeah, my mom and dad are doing it, or my mom's doing it, or my dad. Anyway, so those are just a few of the causes. Of course, if we grew up in a household where there was a lot of neglect or abuse, narcissistic parenting, they can never make it about the kid. So it's always about them. So the kid sits and wonders, like, who am I then? Like, where am I? But if there's a lot of, any kind of alcoholic abuse or drug abuse, there's no time to validate the child because the parent's concerned with their own addiction. Of course, bullying even plays into it. What happens to these kids that are bullied? The greatest gift we can give a kid that's bullied, again, is to listen to them. Parents want to write in and fix it. Well, really listen, actively listen, and help the kid come up with its own solution from inside of themselves. Again, that's building up that self-esteem. So those are just a few of the causes of how perhaps our self-esteem might not be as healthy as it could when we're adults. And then how do we improve the self-esteem? So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes.
Positive self-talk. So we want to put in positive, kind of like you were saying with your example, we want to put in some positive talking that we give. You know, we're so quick to be negative with ourselves. So, you know, I'm a great mom because I do carpool every day for these little munchkins. And sometimes you don't want to call them munchkins, but, you know, I drive carpool every day. I'm a really good parent. That makes you a good parent. You're taking time out of your day to revolve it around your kids. So guess what? As a parent now, you can say that stuff to yourself. And I think I've used this before. We need to be our biggest cheerleaders. I need to be my biggest cheerleader. So
again, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Yes, exactly. Right? When we're adults, there are not a lot of people that are going to be validating us.
No.
Right? I mean, you'll hear things like I'll hear things like, oh, I love that latest podcast. I'm like, great, thank you. But I'm not hearing it from, you know, the tens of thousands of people that listen to the show. I'm hearing it from, you know, a handful of clients that might have come in that particular week that might mention it.
But your child is sitting there, you know, if you start listening only to your child, then, or particularly your adolescent, then you're waiting for those tens of thousands of people who've downloaded the show. Exactly. Like you're sitting there and your happiness is going to be hinging on them banging down your door and telling you how great you are.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not going to happen. So when we're adults, we have to learn to have our own positive self-talk. The other thing I love, and I teach people this, is to look in the mirror. Look in the mirror, say something kind to yourself. Look right at yourself and say whatever you can. Some people have a very, very hard time saying things like, I love you, you're special, you matter, you're worthy, all of these kinds of things. So say what you can to move into that place of I love you, you matter. Mm-hmm. But even if you just say, I really like you, look in the mirror and stare in the mirror for 30 seconds and say, I like you, or I love you, you matter. You're so important. That's not egotistical. That's not selfish. That's not bragging. You're by yourself, for God's sake. Yeah. You know, it's like, just do this to help yourself become really clear about who you are and validate yourself for all these little silly things. I think I've talked about before too. I just started getting up because my son, who's a junior, gave me a hard time. He says, I can't believe you don't get up with me anymore and make my lunch. I'm like, why would I make your lunch? You are 17. So I had stopped doing that. I was doing my own thing in the morning. And I said, well, I would like that now because he's the only one home now. There's no one else, no more foreign exchange student, an older brother. Yeah. So he's just by himself in the morning. He said, would you like me to come and make your lunch in the morning and make you breakfast? If, you know, not that I'm pouring cereal in a bowl or making toast. And he's like, yes. I said, well, here's the trade, because for me, it's like, it's a win-win because I don't really hang out and very much anymore with my 17-year-old. He doesn't want to spend all the time with mom. But I said, here's the deal. You cannot use your phone the whole time you're in the kitchen then.
Oh, nice.
Nice. Isn't that good? So he's like, fine. And I said, fine. So we spend 30 minutes every morning and we talk, and it's win-win. Again, I'm making his lunch. Yeah. You know, I'm giving him breakfast. We talk. It's nice. And then he leaves. But when he leaves, I say to myself again, I'm a really good mom. Like, look what I'm doing here. I'm making his lunch. I'm making his breakfast. You know, I'm building a connection with him. Really good. You know, even if
you're modeling great behavior for him.
I'm modeling great behavior. There are all these things. And I don't do it. Again, I don't tell anybody. I'm just telling myself. And I really do say this every day. I'm like, I'm really good. Even if the conversation's kind of quiet because he's not a morning person. Yeah. There have been times where my adolescence part of me is like, oh, maybe, you know, you were overbearing. You were asking too many questions, because I'm a morning person. He's not. So I could sit and have like a giant, deep conversation at 5:30 in the morning. He's not.
He's not ready.
But I'm like, blah, 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 and sometimes he just doesn't, he goes, and he'll say to me, I really can't talk right now. I'm too tired. I'm like, okay. So I let the silence be, I let there be silence, and it's okay. The next thing is, I would say, we have to learn, again, I was just saying, sometimes the adolescent part comes in and it's going to chime in and tell me, well, you must have made a mistake because he wasn't talking to you all that much today. So the second part is to become an observer of our thoughts. the brain is constantly searching for what's wrong with us and others and is trying to keep us safe. So when we can become an observer, which we do from the adult chair, of those thoughts, when it's trying to actually keep us safe, it's bashing our self-esteem by doing so, because it's saying, well, you should have done this and you should have done that and that wasn't right and your son didn't talk to you today, so it must be your fault. And when I can observe those thoughts, my self-esteem doesn't need to get a punch in the face, basically.
Right.
And the way that we can learn how to be a really good observer of our thoughts is with meditation. So that would be the next one, number 3. Meditation, for all of you people that say, I don't have time and I can't do it. A lot of people say, I can't stop my thoughts. Remember what I've said before. Meditation is a practice, number 1. They call it the practice of meditation. And also, it is not sitting in meditation and stopping your thoughts. The practice is about learning how to observe your thoughts. So it's spending 1 to 10 to 15 to 20 minutes to an hour, however long you want. Just practice witnessing your thoughts. So I can't stop my thoughts, but I can witness them. And the more I witness them, the less they fire in and they're mean to me and they're negative. So in meditation, oftentimes we can connect to something bigger than ourselves. And when there are those, we call it the gap moments within meditation, is when we realize we're so much more than who we think we are. And in those moments, oh my gosh, is when my self-esteem goes through the roof, because I'm like, wow. And it's an experience again of just touching something, the divine, God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. It's like, I'm connected to that. So that, of course, makes our self-esteem really raise or become healthier, because I remember all of these thoughts don't matter because I'm connected to this bigger thing outside of myself.
Right. That's one of those surprising things too. It's like unless you are practicing, then it's really hard to see that experience. It's hard to envision. It's like a runner's high if you are only just starting running. Like, you can't get there until you've done it for a little while. You have to do yourself the honor.
Yes.
To be patient and wait until and you'll know when whatever that experience is for you.
Yeah, it's an experience, and I can't even put it into words, because it's just
exactly. Yeah.
And that's what's so funny about when we talk about meditation. It's like everyone wants connection, and we want to find it from something outside of ourselves. So we, get a partner, we go get a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a spouse, a car, whatever. And really, we can find the greatest connection ever when we sit in meditation. And when we connect to that place, trust me, the self-esteem really, really improves, because we remember who we are on a deeper level.
Right.
Of course, something that we have to consider with self-esteem, if we don't have a really high self-esteem, there might be some kind of depression or sadness going on. So getting outside in nature really helps our mood, helps neurotransmitters. Walking, physical activity gets the endorphins going. This is really helpful for self-esteem too. We want to get outside, do some exercise. That's very, very important. There are no mistakes, only experiences. You hear me hammer this idea home all the time. We come in to have experiences. We're not here to get things perfect. There is no such thing. So when we let ourselves off the hook, and realize, oh, I didn't have to actually do that. I'm here for this experience. So if we feel like we've made a mistake, are there really mistakes? Or was it just an experience that you had and then you get to choose again? It's the ego that judges us. It's that part of us in the adolescent chair that judges our experiences as mistakes. So the more firmly we can sit in the adult, the more clear we are that we're here for an experience.
Well, that gets back to, you're doing it wrong, do it better.
Exactly.
There are no mistakes. Yeah. You just... Yeah,
really.
Perfect.
And we have to look at too, like if I have a low self-esteem, I, look around, I want to look around myself and say, who am I hanging around? Are these people supporting me? Are these people validating me? Do I get a high five when I've done something really good from these people? Are they tearing me down? I hear this from a lot of people, unfortunately, with narcissistic parents. We don't get that when we grow up in that way. We don't get the positive reinforcement and the validation that we actually need. So then sometimes we have friendships as we're older that feel like our parents. because we're not used to it. So we got to pay attention. Like, who am I hanging around? Let's find some people maybe that are more validating of who we are, that are really, again, are going to high five us and celebrate us a little bit more. And we do the same for them. So look around you. Are they supporting you or are they tearing you down? And the last and the best, I think, is to connect with that inner child, because that's the part of us that feels so bad. So bonding and connecting into our inner child, we want to get in touch with her. I've got that meditation on YouTube or on the website. I think I called it accessing the inner child or connecting to the inner child. If you don't know how to do it, go listen to that. And then I've got another inner child meditation that specifically is for codependency and negative programming. It's so beautiful, and it helps us to start correcting, especially that second one that corrects the negative programming. It's very, very good for self-esteem, because in the meditation, I work with your inner child, and we tell that inner child who they really are, and that they're worthy and they deserve and they're lovable. And it's stuff sometimes we just didn't hear as kids. So doing inner child work is powerful for self-esteem in addition to everything else. But that one really is something that will make some big changes.
And we should say, I don't know if I don't think it's up there yet, but for users of the fantastic Insight Timer meditation app, we're uploading your meditations into Insight Timer. So if you search for Michelle Chalfant, and you will start to see more and more of Michelle's great meditations in there. You can use them right in the app. It's a fantastic little tool.
It is my new favorite. That is my favorite app now, you guys. Like, honestly, that Insight Timer, I love it, because I meditate to it every morning, and they have these beautiful like singing bowls, or it sounds like a gong. Bong. Yeah. It's totally beautiful. So in the morning, I put that on, and I start out with this beautiful tone, and then it ends with the same tone. And you're right. So there are 2 meditations of very many that are going up, but so far they've uploaded 2 onto the Insight Timer. So that's really exciting.
That's right. So we should accelerate that child will. We should make sure that one is up. Now that we've talked about it, because right now the empath meditation and the meditation for creating your heart's desire are up there as we record this. But we'll move that, the inner child meditation to the front of the queue. How about that?
I don't know that we can do it. We have submitted a whole bunch of ours, and
have we submitted all of them?
And they are going through them. They have to listen to them, and they go through one at a time.
They have to meditate. They have to see if it's worth it once they meditate to it. It takes forever.
Yeah. But it's a phenomenal app for those of you that are looking for a great meditation app, not just for mine, but there are like thousands and thousands of meditations to choose from. Again, I love the timer, but I love all the other meditations on there too. You can pick any topic, and it's amazing. So
it is amazing. Yes. So, for users, there it is. I'll put a link to Insight in the show notes this week, in addition to the meditation on YouTube, so you can jump over and watch it right there. That's it. That's all we've got. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show, for checking out all the meditations, and for just a reminder, those fantastic 5-star reviews that I know you're just itching to leave us on this show in Apple Podcast or iTunes. We sure appreciate your attention to that. Thanks, everybody. On behalf of Michelle Chalfant, I'm Pete Wright, and we will catch you again next week right here, seated firmly in the adult chair.